In today's video, we will be taking a look at the 2023 elections, which will be taking place in less than 2 days. So without further ado, we're going to be taking a look at the ballot initiatives, General Assembly elections, and the two major gubernatorial elections in 2023, the states of Mississippi, and the most contentious and closely watched race, the state of Kentucky. Now, timestamps are in the description down below if you want to look at a specific part of today's video. Now let's first go to Ohio's issue 1. It's about the right to an abortion, essentially. Voting yes would support establishing a state constitutional right for women to have an abortion, and allow the state to restrict abortion after fetal viability, or based on my understanding, after about 22 weeks, which is a pretty long time. Now, voting no means that you oppose these two measures. Specifically, pretty much you oppose to establish a state constitutional right to abortion. Now, this ballot initiative, based on what I understand, is actually quite confusing, but this is essentially what it is. Now, yes is expected to pass. In the state of Kansas, for instance, the state that voted for Trump by around 15 points in 2020, the ballot initiative that was very similar to this passed by 17 points. So a state like Ohio, which is Republican-leaning, but not necessarily a state where Republicans have a huge advantage in, you'd expect this ballot initiative to pass. Now, what's important about this is that if yes ends up winning by a substantial margin, Republicans may backtrack some of their opposition to abortion. Like Trump right now, he's essentially not really commenting about abortion and saying that he would not impose a national ban because abortion bans are not very popular right now. And if the turnout is high, that would discourage Republicans from moving forward with abortion bans across the United States. Now, Ohio's issue 2 is about marijuana and essentially drug usage, recreational drug usage. Ohio is deciding within 2 days whether to become the 24th state in the nation to legalize recreational marijuana. Issue 2 is about if adults can be over the age of 21 can possess up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana and up to 15 grams of marijuana concentrate and grow 6 plants at home. So it's still relatively restrictive compared to some of the other complete recreational usage laws that have been passed in more Democratic-leaning states. This is also equally likely to end up passing. We generally see these recreational marijuana bills, even in more conservative states, to end up passing. The question is how again, what the turnout will be, and if Republicans can drive up enough turnout to end up opposing this issue. Right now, the prediction again is that most people do expect both of these issues, issue 1 and issue 2, to both pass by pretty substantial margins, but we'll end up seeing what happens. Now, the next race we're going to be talking about is the Virginia General Assembly. Now, this typically is not very covered, and realistically, this is not that important. But what really does matter is that the state of Virginia right now has a Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, and the House of Delegates right now has a Republican majority. Now, the problem for Glenn Youngkin is that if he wants anything to get done, he needs to win the state Senate. Right now, Democrats control 22 seats, and Republicans control 18. Republicans need at least 21 seats to be able to actually do anything, and for Youngkin to pass things like a 15-week abortion ban, etc. And without the state Senate, he will not be able to do anything like that. And in 2025, despite Youngkin being a relatively strong candidate, he is probably going to lose in 2025. So he wants to get something done, and right now, this will be about if Democrats are able to hold on to the state Senate, and Republicans have actually poured a lot of money into this race, hoping to flip the state Senate. Now, it's important for Republicans to also remember that they also have to hold the state House, because if they flip the state Senate and loses the state House, well, they can't do anything either way. Now going to the two more contentious races, the states of Mississippi and Kentucky. Let's first go to the state of Mississippi. The state of Mississippi right now, Tate Reeves, the Republican incumbent, is facing Brandon Presley, the Democratic challenger. Now, Tate Reeves is not the most popular Republican incumbent. In 2019, he won by a narrow 5% against Democrat Jim Hood. Now, there's electoral votes and stuff, which is pretty complicated and hard to explain, But this essentially you also not only you need to win the popular vote, you also have to win the electoral vote. It's a pretty complicated system, but generally you can just consider it as the popular vote. Tate Reeves only won by 5% in an otherwise very, very Republican leaning state, as Trump was able to win Mississippi by about 17 points, though this was expected to be a relatively close race. In 2023, the predictions vary. If you look at the general election, there is a consensus that Republicans are favored. Tate Reeves is favored according to some of the models. However, it isn't as good as the models may make it seem to be. Election Dailies has it as safe Republican, but they haven't updated their model in more than 3 months, close to 4 months in fact. Now, on the Cook Political Report, Inside Elections have it as lean R, and Sabasto's Crystal Ball has it as likely Republican. The big problem for Republicans is if you look at polling, Republicans are not that far ahead. In the recent in all the polls combined, you'll see that Tate Reeves is ahead, but if you average the polls out, he's only ahead by around 6 to 7 points. Not the most promising if you're an incumbent. Furthermore, he hasn't cracked 50% in all but 2 polls, so he hasn't secured a majority. And it's technically possible that Brian Presley will win. Now, do I think that will happen? Probably not. And when I say probably, I think that Tate Reeves has a better than 90% chance of winning. However, just looking at the polling, Tate Reeves is not up by that much. The most recent poll, which is a Democratic intern, does only have this race at a 1% difference. However, even then, if you look at some of the more impartial polls, Tate Reeves is not having that substantial of an advantage. Now, his advantage has actually increased over the past couple of weeks, but we'll have to see what ends up happening. Right now, my prediction is that Tate Reeves will probably end up winning by around a 7 to 8% margin, meaning that Tate Reeves will hold about 52.5% of the vote to Brian Presley, who will hold about 45% or so of the vote. That is my prediction in the state of Mississippi. Now, going to the state of Kentucky, this race is very widely watched. In 2019, Andy Beshear defeated Matt Bevin, the Republican incumbent in that race, by just 5,000 votes. It was just about a 0.35% victory for Andy Beshear. Now, Matt Bevin was not the most popular Republican, contributing to Andy Beshear's victory. Now, in 2023, he will face Daniel Cameron, a Republican, obviously. Now, if you look at the general election polling, you'd see that the predictions have it as between a toss-up and a lean Democratic characterization. Most people do end up believing that Andy Beshear is currently favored in this very Republican-leaning state. I mean, Trump won the state by about 25% in 2020. The Democratic primary here, Andy Beshear secured a 90% of the vote, which does mean the party is unifying behind him, which is a good sign going into a general election. Now, in Daniel Cameron's primary, he was able to secure just under 50% of the vote, which is pretty good compared to what polling had suggested that Kelly Craft or Ryan Carlos could end up actually posing a serious threat. He did end up pulling ahead by more than 25 percentage points, which is a good sign for him. He does have a substantial amount of support in his own party, at least for a challenger. Now, the endorsements, obviously, that there's nothing surprising here. Now, Andy Beshear, he is consistently leading in the polls, except for 2, Senegal and Emerson College, which both have the races tied. Now, it's important to realize that this poll that had it as tied was taken about 6 months ago, 5 to 6 months ago, and was by a Republican intern. And the most recent Republican intern actually has Andy Beshear up by 2 percentage points. Now, the important thing here to look at for a tie is the Emerson College poll, which is a pretty good poll, right? FiveThirtyEight has it as A-, which is really good of a characterization. Andy Beshear and Daniel Cameron are both at 47%, with 2% voting for others, and 4% being undecided. Now, it's important to realize that even if you don't believe this poll that it's tied, that if you look at Andy Beshear's numbers, he's consistently falling just short of 50%, with the exception of 3 polls. Most polls have him between 47% and 49% support. and Daniel Cameron is at about 40 to 45% consistently across the polls. Now, this race is still very close. For one thing, Andy Bashir has now cracked 50%, but also polls do have margins of error, especially in governor elections, because more voters are generally able to cross party lines. After all, they voted for Trump by 25 points in the presidential election in 2020, but they may very well be voting for a Democrat, as they did in 2019. Governor races are historically more challenging to poll, and that predictions in governor elections are not that simple. For example, just about 4 years ago in 2019, the general election predictions, most people had this as a to lean our prediction, and that did not happen. Ultimately, Andy Bashir came up victorious. And could Daniel Cameron pull off the upset? Right now, I'd say it is certainly not just possible, but actually pretty plausible. Nonetheless speaking, right now I still believe that Andy Bashir is favored against Daniel Cameron by about 2 percentage points. My current prediction is that Andy Bashir will win with around 50% of the vote to Daniel Cameron at 48%. This race will be exceptionally competitive, and right now I say that Andy Bashir has around a 65% chance of victory, and Daniel Cameron has just over a third of the chance of victory. Anyways, thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.